In this video, we're going to take a closer look at observational studies. In an observational study, our goal is to collect data about the entire population. However, typically it's too costly to perform a census. So a census, if you'll recall, is when we speak to or observe every member of the population. So instead, we're going to find a sample that has the same relevant characteristics as the population, and there are different ways in which to do that in order to collect sample data. So again, we're looking at the entire population, and we want to collect part of that population. So that sample is located within the population. It's part of the population, but it's a much smaller part. Now, the key term here is that it has the same relevant characteristics and that it's a representative sample. So for instance, if I'm looking at whether or not taking vitamins as a child, will affect their overall health when they graduate high school, well, relevant characteristics would be that obviously I'm looking at children. The representative sample would have to include children of different ages, different races, different socioeconomic levels. It has to be representative of the entire population. I can't go to a rich school and just talk to all the rich kids. I can't go to a poor school and just talk to all the poor kids. You get the idea. It has to be representative of the entire population and not favor one group over another. Now, there are lots of ways to do this. They all have their strong suits and they all have their drawbacks. So in the next several slides, we're going to look at what is a random sample, a simple random sample, stratified sample, cluster sample, systematic sample, or convenience sample. The first two sampling methods are the random sample and the simple random sample. So in a random sample, every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. And typically what will happen is each subject, which is the member of the population, is assigned a number, and then they use a random number generator to determine those chosen for the sample. So typically when I'm showing you something in Excel, you'll see that I'm going to actually open up the spreadsheet live in front of you and work through those examples with you. This one's super easy and I didn't want to waste the time in doing that. So all I've done is paste the function that I would use here. If I had a group of 897 in my population and I wanted a sample of 20, notice this is my sample of 20 based on the rand between function 1, 897, that would give me a random number from 1 to 897, and I've pasted that into 20 cells, and so I have 20 random numbers. So that's how that rand between function works, so that should help you on your first project. Super duper easy. Now, a simple random sample is similar, except we're looking now at every sample from the population as having an equal chance of being selected. For example, if I want to know how on-campus students would rate the food in the cafeteria, I could randomly select several residential classes, residential meaning that they meet on campus, and then randomly select several students from each of those classes to survey. That would be a simple random sample, because every sample, every class of students had the same chance of being selected. The next two sampling methods are the stratified sample and the cluster sample. And I've put these on the same page because students often get these two confused. The stratified sample has everything to do with the word proportion. So in a stratified sample, we are very interested in making sure that a specific characteristic is equally representative in our sample. So for instance, if freshmen make up 40% of the student body, then our sample would be comprised of 40% responses from freshmen. So it's basically taking the entire student body and saying, here's all the freshmen, here's all the sophomores, here's all the upperclassmen, and saying if there's 40% freshmen in the population and 20% sophomores and 40% upperclassmen, then we're going to keep those same levels in our sample. That's stratified. Now, a cluster sample is different. In a cluster sample, the population is divided into subgroups called clusters that are similar to the population of whole clusters, similar to the population, and the whole cluster is chosen at random. So if you think back to the example we looked at on our last slide, where we said, I want to talk to students about eating in the cafeteria. If I thought about each class as a cluster, and instead of taking a random sample from within each class, I said, I'm going to choose, MA 101, which is obviously a lower level math class, and Comp 150, and I'm going to choose a random MA 101 class and a random Comp 150 class. You get the idea. That would be a cluster if I talk to everybody in that class. But I didn't talk to all the MA 101 students. I just talked to the class that was randomly selected. And the last two are systematic and convenience. Systematic is the one that everybody gets right, because systematic is where you talk to every nth member of the population. So every fourth something, every fifth something, every 10th something, every 20th something. This is a great sampling method as long as the grouping that you come up with does not include any biases. So the example that I have here is, let's say I spoke to every fifth person in line at the cafeteria on campus. That's not a great systematic sample because obviously the people in line at food service like the food or like it enough to be there. Whereas if I talk to, every fifth person who came through the student center, whether they were going to eat there or not, then that would be a little bit more fair or representative because I would also include people who were not there to eat. And the last one is a convenient sample, and that's just exactly what it sounds like. It's whatever is convenient for the researcher. When I'm teaching this class on campus, I always say, okay, let's say I wanted to know something about stats kids, and I just talk to all of you because you're standing in front of me. Then that's convenient for me because you're in front of me, but it might not be fair. There might be some bias based on whatever it is that I'm trying to find out about them. Let's take a look at a few examples together. The first one is a pollster surveys 50 people in each of a senator's 12 voting precincts. So, what would be the sampling method? Well, the key thing here is that we're looking at essentially equal representation for all 12 of the voting precincts. So this would be stratified sampling. So each precinct represents a strata. For the next question, the quality control department at a cereal manufacturer company measures the weight of every 10th box off of the assembly line. Everybody loves when they get a question like this because everybody knows systematic sampling. They're choosing every nth box where n happens to be 10. Lastly, a female student walks down the halls in her dorm room asking students how much money they would spend in a food court in the dorm lobby in an effort to persuade the administration to offer that option. So again, there's really no method to her madness. She's just talking to people that she can get a hold of. That is convenience. It's very easy for her to speak to people who are walking down the hall. Here are two similar questions for you to try on your own. So press pause, try these questions, then press play to see how you did. The first one, an educator chooses 5 of the school districts in the Chicago area and asks each household in those districts how many school-age children are in the home. So randomly choosing 5 school districts and then asks each household in that district. So the fact that it's each household in those districts tells us that this is going to be a cluster sample. So remember, cluster says we've got all of these different clusters. We're randomly selecting clusters. So 5 clusters, and then asking everybody in that cluster. Last one, to determine who will win a $100,000 shopping spree at the mall, the manager draws a name out of the box of entries. So this would be a random sample because every name in the box has an equal chance of being chosen. Looking more deeply at observational studies, there are different types of observational studies. One is a cross-sectional study, and a cross-sectional study is exactly what it sounds like, cross-sectional. It's a cross-section. You're looking at one single point in time and you're collecting data there. Whereas a longitudinal study is that data is gathered over a period of time. So a particular group over a period of time. So think of the word long, it's a longer period of time, whereas a cross-section is just one moment in time. And then there's meta-analysis and case study. So a meta-analysis, so these two sort of go together because they're talking about the time period. And then there's meta-analysis and case study. So meta-analysis is a study that compiles information from previous studies. So we're analyzing data that's already available. A case study looks at multiple variables that affect a single event. So I think this will make more sense when we look at a couple of examples together. For the first, we're looking just at cross-sectional or longitudinal. So a group of 220 patients is followed. So hopefully already you're like, okay, done. Where they're followed for 15 years in order to determine the long-term health effects resulting from gastric bypass surgery. So again, it's not at one moment in time, it's following them. It's longitudinal. The second one, a gastroenterologist surveys 130 of his patients 6 months after having gastric bypass surgery to determine the average amount of weight lost. So again, this is at a specific point in time, 6 months after their surgery. This is going to be cross-sectional. Now this one's specific to meta-analysis or case study. So if you'll remember, meta-analysis is if we're looking at several studies that have already occurred and then determining whatever outcome from those studies. A case study is looking at several variables that might affect an outcome. So for A, oceanographers study research on tsunamis dating from 1900 to 2000 to determine their effects on the ocean floor. So again, we're looking at studies that have already happened over this time period. This is going to be meta-analysis. Meteorologists studied the Indian Ocean tsunami of December 2004 and tried to identify warning signs. So remember, case study said looking at several factors related to one thing, and that's what this is. Several factors related to, in this case, the tsunami of December 2004. Up next, we're going to take a closer look at experiments.